The call came on a Tuesday, late afternoon. The sky was a bruised purple over the New York skyline, the kind of color that promised a cold night. I was sitting in my living room, the city's hum, a familiar blanket of white noise, when the screen lit up with my mother's name. A knot tightened in my gut. Family calls, especially from her, rarely brought good news. They always felt less like a conversation and more like a summons, a reminder of a debt I could never fully pay. "Michael." Her voice was thin, almost a whisper, as if she were delivering bad news from a hospital waiting room. "We need to talk." I'd always been the one they could count on, the one who left our small, quiet town in Ohio for the big city, not to escape, but to build something solid, something that could, in some small way, lift them up. I worked hard, saved harder. My parents, bless their hearts, were never great with money. They lived paycheck to paycheck, their lives a constant juggling act of bills and unexpected expenses. And then there was Sarah, my little sister, the light of their lives, the one who never had to worry about a thing, the one I loved fiercely, but whose existence felt at times like a financial siphon. "Mom, is everything okay? What's wrong?" I asked, my voice betraying my anxiety. "It's about Sarah's wedding," she said, and a new kind of dread settled over me. "The venue. It's so much more than we expected. And the catering, and the dress. Michael, we're short. We're so short." I knew this was coming. The wedding had been the sole topic of conversation for months. Sarah, who was 28 and had just gotten her first teaching job, wanted a dream wedding, a fairy tale, and my parents, in their endless desire to see her happy, had promised it to her. They'd promised things they couldn't afford. My sister, in her joyful, blissful ignorance, had no idea of the financial strain this was putting on our parents. Or maybe she did, and chose to ignore it. I wasn't sure which was worse. "How much?" I asked, my mind already calculating the numbers. My savings account, my rainy day fund, my retirement. I saw the figures flash before my eyes, the years of discipline and sacrifice. I'd always told myself it was for a reason, for my future. But a part of me always knew that reason was interchangeable with my family. $50,000, she said, and the number hit me like a physical blow. The silence on my end stretched out, filled with the static of 1,000 memories. Memories of working 2 jobs in college, eating instant noodles for dinner, of passing on vacations and new cars. All so I could have this cushion, this $50,000 that was now the price of my sister's happiness. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just sighed, a long, weary exhalation that felt like it carried the weight of my entire life. "I'll wire it tomorrow, Mum," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Just tell me how." "Oh, Michael, thank you. You're saving everything," she gushed, the relief in her voice palpable. "I knew I could count on you. Sarah is going to be so happy." The next day, I went to the bank. It felt surreal, like I was moving through a dream. I filled out the forms, signed my name, and watched as the number on my screen, a number I had worked so hard to build, dwindled. It wasn't the money itself that hurt. It was the principle, the expectation, the fact that it was not a question, but a command. The family needed. I provided. It was always that way. And yet, for the first time in my life, I felt a simmering resentment, a quiet anger that sat like a stone in my stomach. That night, I called my best friend, David. We'd known each other since we were kids, and he was the only person I could talk to about this, without feeling like a child complaining about his parents. He worked in finance, and he understood the numbers. But more than that, he understood the family dynamics. He had watched it play out for years. "They did it again, didn't they?" as he said, his voice laced with a knowing sympathy. "50 grand, David. Poof. Gone. Just like that," I said, my voice raw. "You let them, Mike. You let them." His words, blunt and honest, were a mirror I didn't want to look into. He was right. I had let them. I had given in, as I always did. The guilt and the obligation were stronger than my desire for financial independence. The idea of disappointing them, of telling them no and seeing the hope fade from their faces, was a pain I couldn't bear. But now, as I looked at my depleted savings, I wondered if I was simply trading one kind of pain for another. The months that followed were a blur of wedding planning updates. My mother would call, her voice now cheerful and triumphant, describing the details I had made possible: the beautiful floral arrangements, the live band, the custom-made cake. Each detail, each mention, was a subtle jab, a reminder of what I had given up. They never said, "Thank you." They just talked about the wedding as if it were a collaborative effort, an event they had all planned and saved for. It was as if my $50,000 was just a small, insignificant part of the grand plan. The invitations were sent out. Mine arrived in the mail, crisp and elegant, addressed to Mr. Michael Harrison. It felt less like a personal invitation and more like a formal acknowledgement of my existence. I put it on my mantelpiece, a stark reminder of the financial transaction I had participated in. The date loomed. My flight to Ohio was booked. I was ready to go home, ready to see my sister in her wedding dress, ready to put on a brave face and pretend that everything was fine, that I hadn't just sacrificed a significant portion of my future for a single day. I was ready to play my part, to be the good son, the good brother. Then the final blow came. A few days before the wedding, my mother called again. Her voice this time was hesitant, a stark contrast to her previous cheerful demeanor. "Michael, I need to ask you something. It's about the wedding." Here it comes, I thought. Another request, another obligation. We were thinking, well, Sarah and I, we were talking. We decided that maybe you shouldn't come. I froze. The phone felt heavy in my hand. The hum of the city outside suddenly seemed to die down, leaving only a deafening silence. "What?" I finally managed to say, the word a strained whisper. "It's just, with all the family coming, and your father's side, and all the seats, we decided to prioritize the more immediate family," she said, stumbling over her words. The phrase "more immediate family" hung in the air, a cruel, impossible sentence. A betrayal. The one who had saved the day, the one who had sacrificed his hard-earned money, was now being told he was not welcome. The truth, ugly and painful, began to unravel itself in my mind. The money wasn't a gift. It was a transaction. And now the transaction was complete. I was no longer needed. My role was over. "You used my money to pay for this wedding," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "and now you're telling me I can't come?" The truth was a bitter pill to swallow. I had always known my family loved my sister more, but I had convinced myself that my financial contributions were a testament to my place in the family, a guarantee of my importance. Now I saw it for what it was, a tool, a means to an end. My mother's silence was my answer. I didn't need to hear her weak excuses. I didn't need to hear her stammering apologies. The long shadow of obligation, the one I had lived under my entire life, had finally consumed me. And in that moment, as I stared at the invitation on my mantel, I realized I was not just a provider. I was an afterthought, a ghost in my own family's grand celebration. My heart was pounding, a furious drumbeat against my ribs. The cold anger from before had turned into a burning rage, a fire that threatened to consume me. My family had taken my money, my sacrifice, my years of hard work, and then, in a final act of casual cruelty, they had taken my place. They had erased me from the picture. They had tried to stop me from attending a wedding that was, in large part, paid for by me. The call ended. The silence returned, but this time it was filled with the sound of my own shattered expectations. The hurt was a physical ache in my chest, a deep, hollow emptiness. I looked at the invitation again, the elegant script now a mockery. It was a symbol of their betrayal, a cold and impersonal thank you for my money. And in that moment, a new thought, a new resolve began to form in my mind. They might have used me, but they hadn't broken me. They had taken my money, but they hadn't taken my will. I wasn't going to just sit by and let this happen. I was going to Ohio. I was going to that wedding, and I was going to have my say. My story, my family's story, was about to be rewritten. The long shadow of obligation was about to be cast aside. The time for being the quiet, compliant provider was over. It was time for a reckoning. The flight to Columbus, Ohio was a blur. The familiar landscape of rural America, the patchwork of green and brown fields unfolded beneath the plane's wing. It was a landscape of memory, a place I had escaped, but also a place that held the threads of my identity. The air in the terminal felt different, heavier, thick with the scent of Midwestern humidity and the ghosts of my past. I grabbed my rental car, a compact sedan that felt small and insignificant after years of navigating New York traffic in a city that demands a certain kind of armor. The drive from the airport to my parents' house was a silent journey through time. The streets were the same, the storefronts of familiar businesses, some gone, some new. The city of my youth felt simultaneously alien and intimately familiar. I passed my old high school, the football field where I'd spent so many Friday nights under the bright lights, the diner where I'd had my first date. Each landmark was a reminder of a simpler time, a time before I was the family's financial lifeline, before money became the language of our love. I pulled up to the house, a modest two-story colonial with a well-kept lawn. It was my parents' pride and joy, the home they had worked their entire lives to own. My father was on the porch, watering the potted geraniums, a ritual he performed with an almost religious devotion. He looked older than I remembered, his shoulders a little more stooped, his hair a little grayer. When he saw me, his face registered a flash of surprise, followed by a flicker of unease. He knew I was not supposed to be here. "Michael?" he said, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. "Hi, Dad," I said, a wave of weariness washing over me. I wanted to hug him, to feel the comfort of his embrace, but the unspoken tension between us was a physical barrier. He put the watering can down. "You weren't—" "We didn't expect you." "I know," I said, my eyes meeting his. I saw a hint of shame in his gaze, a fleeting acknowledgement of the family's secret. "I'm here for the wedding. My sister's wedding, the one I helped pay for." My mother appeared in the doorway, her face pale, her hands wringing a kitchen towel. Her eyes, usually so expressive, were guarded. "Michael, we talked about this. It's not a good idea." "Why not, Mom?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Is it because I'm not immediate family anymore? Is that what happens when you cut the check? You become an outsider?" The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of years of unsaid truths. My father looked away, his gaze fixed on the wilting geraniums. My mother's lips tightened into a thin line. She was a master of evasion, a virtuoso of avoiding difficult conversations. "It's not about that," she finally said, her voice strained. "It's just... you and your sister. You haven't been close. We didn't want any drama." The lie was so transparent, so insulting, it took my breath away. "Drama? You mean like me showing up to a wedding that cost me my life savings, after you told me I couldn't come? That kind of drama?" "Michael, please," she said, her voice a plea now. "Don't ruin this for Sarah. This is her day." "Her day?" I scoffed. The anger I had been holding back since the phone call bubbled to the surface. "This is my day too. This is the culmination of my hard work, my sacrifice. You can't just take that and pretend it never happened. You can't just erase me." My father finally spoke, his voice low and firm. "Enough, both of you. Michael, come inside. We need to talk." We went into the living room, the space filled with framed photos of Sarah, her childhood, her graduation, her engagement. The whole house felt like a shrine to her, a monument to the only child who ever really mattered. My place in this family felt like a guest bedroom, a temporary space for someone who would eventually leave. They sat on the sofa, a united front, a silent indictment. I stood by the fireplace, the heat of the gas logs doing little to thaw the cold in the room. "Son," my father began, "we never meant to hurt you. It's just, Sarah is getting married. She has a right to have the wedding she wants, and we were struggling. We didn't know who else to turn to." "And you thought I wouldn't notice $50,000 was missing from my account?" I asked, my voice rising. "Did you think I was just a walking ATM, a resource to be used and discarded?" My mother's face crumpled. "Michael, you're our son. We love you. This isn't about that. It's about not creating a scene. This wedding is a big deal. Her fiancé's family is very traditional. They have very high expectations." I stared at them, the truth of their words hitting me with a chilling clarity. It wasn't just about me, it was about appearances, about maintaining a certain facade for their new in-laws. My presence, a reminder of the ugly, messy reality of their financial situation, was a stain on their perfect picture. "So I'm an embarrassment?" I asked, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. "Is that what you're saying? My life, my work, my existence is an inconvenience to your perfect wedding?" My mother started to cry, silent tears streaming down her face. My father, seeing her distress, put a protective arm around her. It was a familiar pattern, one I had seen 1,000 times. Her tears were a weapon, a way to turn the tables, to make me the villain. "Michael, you're being unfair," my father said, his voice filled with a weary frustration. "We did what we had to do. We're your parents. We sacrificed for you your whole life." "And I sacrificed for you," I shot back, the dam of my composure finally breaking. "I gave you my money. All of my life, it's been about what I could do for you, what I could provide, what I could be, and what did I get in return? A lie, a betrayal, a don't come to the wedding call. Do you have any idea how that feels?" The argument escalated, voices rising and falling, a symphony of old resentments and new betrayals. The front door opened and Sarah walked in, her arms laden with shopping bags. She stopped dead in her tracks, her face a mask of confusion and concern. "Mom! Dad! What's going on?" she asked, her voice light and innocent, a stark contrast to the heavy air in the room. My mother's tears intensified. "Oh, Sarah," she sobbed. "It's Michael. He's being so difficult." Sarah's eyes landed on me, a mixture of surprise and coldness settling in. She didn't hug me. She didn't greet me. She just stared, her face a blank canvas. "Michael, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here." The words, so similar to my mother's, were a final, brutal confirmation. The family was a united front, and I was on the outside looking in. The familiar surroundings felt foreign, the people I had known my whole life now strangers. I had come home for a confrontation, and I had found something far worse, a family that had moved on without me, a family that saw me not as a son and brother, but as a ghost of their past, a painful reminder of a debt they had chosen to ignore. The battle lines were drawn, and the wedding, the one I had paid for, was about to become the battleground. The tension in the house was a thick, suffocating fog. Sarah, after a brief, awkward exchange, had retreated to her room, leaving my parents and me in the living room, a silent standoff. The air crackled with unspoken accusations and years of pent-up frustration. My father, a man of few words, finally broke the silence. "You need to understand, son," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Your mother and we're not young anymore. We wanted to give Sarah a start in her new life, a good one, something we never had." "And you couldn't do that without taking from me?" I asked, the bitterness in my voice a sour taste on my tongue. "You couldn't have just talked to me, said, 'Son, we're in trouble, we need your help'?" My mother wiped her eyes with the corner of her kitchen towel. "We tried, Michael. Every time we talked about it, you got so quiet. We knew you were building your own life. We just didn't want to be a burden." The irony was not lost on me. In their attempt to not be a burden, they had become the heaviest one of all. "And now you've put me in an impossible position," I said, my voice rising. "I've paid for this wedding, and now I'm supposed to pretend I don't exist, to miss the most important day of my sister's life." "We thought it was for the best," my mother whispered, her gaze fixed on the floor. "We didn't want the tension. We didn't want to make things awkward. We just wanted everyone to be happy." But their version of happy was an illusion, a lie built on my money and their deceit. The perfect family they were presenting to the world and to their new in-laws was a fragile facade, and I was the crack they were trying to hide. I left the house, the front door closing behind me with a hollow thud. I got back in my rental car and drove to the only place I knew would feel like home, David's house. He lived just a few miles away in a quiet suburban neighborhood that had changed little over the years. When I pulled into his driveway, he was on his porch, a beer in his hand, as if he had been waiting for me. He saw the look on my face and didn't say a word. He just opened the door, handed me a beer, and we sat in silence for a long time. "So the prodigal son returns," he finally said, his voice gentle. "More like the inconvenient son," I said, taking a long sip of the cold beer. "They told me not to come." David nodded. I figured, it's their usual playbook. Blame the victim, make you feel guilty for being angry about being taken advantage of. "It's not just the money, David," I said, the words spilling out in a torrent. "It's the principle, the betrayal, the fact that they just used me and then tried to throw me away like I was nothing, like I was a stranger." "You're not a stranger, Mike," he said, his voice firm. "You're a threat. You're the one who knows the secret, the one who can expose the lie." His words hit me with a jolt of recognition. He was right. My presence wasn't a source of tension. It was a threat to their carefully constructed narrative. A narrative in which they were the loving parents who had done everything for their daughter, and her wedding was a gift of pure love, not a transaction funded by their estranged son. We talked for hours, the conversation flowing between past and present, between our childhood memories and the painful reality of the current situation. He reminded me of the times I had sacrificed for my family, from putting off college for a year to help them with a medical bill, to wiring them money for a new roof. He reminded me that this wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern I had allowed to continue for years out of a sense of misguided loyalty and obligation. "You're not a bad guy, Mike," he said, his hand on my shoulder. "You're a good man who got tangled in a toxic family dynamic. But you have a choice now. You can either let them continue to control you, or you can stand up for yourself. The money is gone, you can't get that back, but you can reclaim your dignity. You can reclaim your self-worth." His words were a lifeline, a beam of light cutting through the fog of my confusion and pain. He was right. The money was a sunk cost. The real battle wasn't about the money anymore. It was about me. It was about my place in this family, about whether I was a person with feelings and boundaries, or just a resource to be exploited. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose. The anger was still there, a low burn in my stomach, but it was no longer a destructive force. It was a fuel, a motivator. I went back to my parents' house, this time with a plan. The wedding was the next day. I had to face them, and my sister, head-on. I had to make them see. I found my mother in the kitchen, fussing over a centerpiece for the rehearsal dinner. She looked tired, the lines on her face deeper than I remembered. She saw me and her shoulders slumped. "Michael, please," she said, her voice laced with exhaustion. Can't we just forget about this?" "No, Mom," I said, my voice calm but firm. "We can't. We have to talk. All of us." I found Sarah in her room, a mountain of wedding invitations and thank you cards on her desk. She was smiling, her face radiant with the glow of a soon-to-be bride. When she saw me, the smile faltered. "Michael," she said, her voice cool, "I thought you were leaving." "I'm not leaving, Sarah," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm staying. We need to talk. You, me, Mom and Dad. Right now." The four of us sat in the living room, the same space where the argument had unfolded the day before. The tension was palpable, but this time I was in control. I wasn't just reacting. I was leading the conversation. "Sarah," I began, my voice steady, "I need you to understand something. I love you. I've always loved you. I've always wanted the best for you." She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "I know that, Michael, but why are you making this so difficult?" "Because it's not fair," I said, the words hanging in the air. "It's not fair to me. It's not fair to our parents. And it's not fair to you, because you don't even know the truth." My mother's eyes widened. "Michael, don't," she pleaded. I ignored her. "Sarah, your dream wedding, the one you're about to have, it wasn't a gift. It was a purchase. Your fiancé's family isn't footing the bill." Our parents aren't. I am. I paid for it. I gave them $50,000, a significant portion of my life savings so you could have this day. And after I gave it to them, they told me I wasn't welcome. They told me I couldn't come." Sarah's face went from radiant joy to a mask of pure shock and disbelief. She looked at my parents, her eyes wide with a question that hung in the air like a thundercloud. My mother looked away, unable to meet her gaze. My father sighed, a sound of resigned defeat. The truth was out. The lie was exposed. The perfect, happy family facade had crumbled, and in its place was the messy, ugly reality of our broken bonds. The silence that followed was a chasm, a deep, unbridgeable divide between us. The wedding was no longer just a celebration. It was a reckoning, and for the first time in my life I felt a sense of power. I had finally told the truth. The long shadow of obligation was starting to lift, and in its place was the cold, hard light of reality. The silence that followed my confession was a living thing, breathing and heavy. Sarah's eyes, fixed on our parents, were wide with a mix of shock and betrayal. My mother's face was pale, a mix of guilt and defensiveness warring in her expression. My father, who had always been the quiet anchor of the family, just looked defeated, his gaze on the floor, as if the very act of looking at me was too much to bear. "Is this true?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, a stark contrast to the lively, excited tone from moments before. My mother wrung her hands. "Sarah, honey, it's not that simple. We were just trying to protect you. We didn't want you to worry." "Protect me?" Sarah's voice rose, a sharp edge of anger cutting through the air. "By lying to me? By taking money from Michael and then trying to kick him out of my wedding? What kind of protection is that?" "It wasn't like that," my father said, finally lifting his head. "We didn't kick him out. We just thought it would be easier if he wasn't here. With everything going on, we thought a little space would be good." "Space?" I interjected, the disbelief in my voice palpable. "I've been giving you space for years. I moved over 700 miles away. I've been giving you my hard-earned money and my quiet compliance. What more space could you possibly need?" The truth, once spoken, had a life of its own. It was a whirlwind, tearing through the carefully constructed lies and polite fictions that had held our family together for so long. Sarah, my sister, the one I had worked so hard for, the one I had always shielded, was now seeing the full, ugly picture for the first time. The perfect wedding, the fairy tale she had been living, was a mirage built on a foundation of deceit. $50,000, she said, her voice trembling. "Michael, is that really true?" "Yes, Sarah," I said, my voice gentle. "It is. It was my life savings. I gave it to them so you could have the wedding you wanted. I did it because I love you, because I've always wanted you to be happy." Her eyes filled with tears, not of joy, but of a deep, profound sadness. She looked at our parents, the two people who were supposed to be her pillars, her protectors. How could you do this to him, to me, to our family?" My mother started to cry, real tears this time, not the manipulative kind. "We're sorry, Michael, we really are. We never meant to hurt you. We got in over our heads. We got so caught up in the dream. We lost sight of what was real." The apology felt hollow, a desperate attempt to put the genie back in the bottle. But the truth was out. The bonds were broken. The family, as I had known it, was in pieces. Sarah, her face a mixture of anger and confusion, turned to me. "So you just wired them the money? You didn't even ask questions? You didn't say no?" The question was a direct hit. It was the one I had been asking myself for months, the one David had pointed out so bluntly. "I didn't say no because I've never been able to," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "For my entire life, I've been the one who has to say yes, the one who has to provide, the one who has to fix things. I gave you the money because I thought it was what a good brother was supposed to do. I thought it was what a good son was supposed to do. I thought it was the price of being a part of this family." The words hung in the air, a final, raw admission of my own complicity. I had enabled this. I had allowed them to use me. My resentment, my anger, was as much directed at myself as it was at them. Sarah, her jaw set, looked at her parents. "I don't even want this wedding anymore. Not like this. Not if it's built on a lie." My mother's head snapped up. "Sarah, don't say that. This is your day. Everything is perfect. Your fiancé's family is coming. The guests are on their way. You can't just cancel it." "Why not?" Sarah shot back, the tears now flowing freely. "I don't want to get married in a venue that Michael paid for. I don't want to dance to a band that he funded. This isn't my dream. This is a debt. And it's a debt I don't want to start my marriage with." The argument that followed was a chaotic storm of emotions. My mother pleaded. My father tried to reason. And Sarah, a new kind of strength in her voice, stood her ground. For the first time, she was seeing me not as a distant, successful older brother, but as a person, a human being who had been hurt. And for the first time, she was standing up for me. For us. "We will figure this out," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. "But it won't be like this. We will get married, but we will do it with the truth. No more lies." She turned and went upstairs, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the silence. My parents looked at me, a mixture of anger, sorrow, and confusion on their faces. The perfect picture they had so desperately tried to paint had been ruined, and I was the one who had taken the brush and smeared the canvas. I didn't stay for dinner. I just left. I got in my car and drove, the Ohio roads a blur in the fading light. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't go back to David's. I needed to be alone. I needed to process what had just happened. The conversation had been a success, in a way. The truth was out. But the price was high. The family was in shambles, the bonds that had held us together for so long now severed. I found myself at a park, a small quiet place with a pond and a few scattered benches. I sat on one, staring out at the placid water, the reflection of the streetlights dancing on its surface. The cold night air was a welcome contrast to the heated emotions of the last few hours. I thought about what had just transpired. I had come to Ohio seeking a confrontation, and I had gotten it. I had wanted them to acknowledge the wrong they had done, and they had, in a way. But the victory felt hollow. My family was broken. The people I loved, the people I had sacrificed for, were now strangers. But as I sat there, a different kind of feeling started to settle in. It was a sense of peace, a feeling of liberation. The long shadow of obligation, the one that had loomed over me my entire life, was gone. The weight on my shoulders was gone. I was no longer the family's ATM, their fixer, their silent provider. I was just Michael, a man with a bruised heart, but a clear conscience. I had stood up for myself. I had demanded respect. And in doing so, I had finally, truly, come home. The road ahead was uncertain. The family was in pieces. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't just fixing things for them. I was fixing things for myself. And that, I realized, was a start. The next day, the day of the wedding, the air was different. The silence at my parents' house was no longer heavy with tension, but with a fragile sense of calm. The storm had passed, leaving behind a quiet devastation. My mother, her eyes red and puffy, moved through the house like a ghost, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced with a somber resolve. My father, who had always been the emotional bulwark of the family, seemed to have shrunk, his shoulders slumped, his face etched with a silent sorrow. I stayed at David's, a deliberate act of separation. The distance felt necessary, a way to let the dust settle before the main event. He was a silent comfort, a presence that grounded me in the reality that my feelings were valid, that my anger was justified. "You did the right thing, Mike," he said that morning, as we ate a quiet breakfast. "It was hard, but it was the right thing. It's time they faced the music." "I don't know if I did the right thing," I confessed, the doubt gnawing at me. I might have just blown my family apart. "Was it a family if it was built on lies?" he countered, his words a gentle but firm rebuke. "You didn't break them, Mike. They were already broken. You just chose to see the truth." His words resonated. I had spent my entire life pretending everything was fine, pretending our family was whole, when in reality it was built on a foundation of unspoken resentments and financial exploitation. My confrontation had been the demolition, a painful but necessary act to clear the way for something real. My phone rang. It was Sarah. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had no idea what to expect. An angry tirade, a desperate plea. I took a deep breath and answered. "Michael?" Her voice was soft, hesitant. Can you come over? I need to talk to you." "Yeah," I said, my voice a little rough. "I'll be there in 20. When I arrived, the house was a flurry of activity. The photographer was there, a young woman with a harried look on her face trying to capture the perfect pre-wedding shots. The smell of hairspray and perfume hung in the air. Sarah was in the living room, in her wedding dress, a stunning white gown that flowed around her like a cloud. She looked like a princess, a vision of beauty. But her face when she looked at me was not a mask of pure joy. It was a canvas of conflicting emotions, sorrow, regret, and a nascent flicker of understanding. She dismissed the photographer with a wave of her hand. My parents, who were hovering nearby, were sent to another room with a quiet but firm command from Sarah. She wanted to talk to me alone. It was a deliberate act, a statement. This was no longer about them. This was about us. "I'm so sorry, Michael," she said, her voice trembling. The words hung in the air, a fragile, unexpected gift. "I had no idea. I swear, I had no idea." "I know," I said, my voice thick with emotion. The years of resentment, the bitterness, began to dissolve in the face of her genuine remorse. "I never thought you did." She came closer, the rustling of her gown a soft sound in the quiet room. I was so caught up in it all. The planning, the dress, the venue. I was so excited I didn't see. I didn't see what was happening. "It's not your fault, Sarah," I said, a sense of relief washing over me. "It's their fault. And it's mine, too. I should have said something sooner." "No," she said, her voice firm. "Don't you dare blame yourself. You've always been there for us, and they took advantage of that. They took advantage of you. And they did it for me." She looked down at her dress, the beautiful, expensive fabric a sudden weight on her shoulders. "I feel so dirty, like this whole day is a lie." "It doesn't have to be," I said, my hand on her arm. "Your marriage is real. Your love for him is real. This is just a celebration, a party. It doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to define your marriage." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a fresh wave of tears. "Thank you, Michael," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you for telling me the truth, even if it hurts. I needed to know." It was an honest, vulnerable moment between us, a bridge being built over the chasm of lies and unspoken truths. The sister I had loved and the brother I had been were finally seeing each other again, not as roles to be played, but as real people with real feelings. The rest of the morning passed in a quiet, subdued frenzy of last-minute preparations. I helped my father with the boutonnieres, a silent, awkward collaboration. I hugged my mother goodbye as she left for the church, a hug that felt more like a truce than a sign of affection. I went with Sarah in the limo, just the two of us, the silence between us no longer tense but companionable. We talked about the future, about her dreams for her new life, about my life in New York. The lies were gone, and in their place, a new fragile connection was being formed. At the church, the air was electric with anticipation. Her fiancé, a kind, gentle man named Mark, was waiting for her at the altar, a look of pure, unadulterated love on his face. When he saw her, his eyes lit up. The ceremony was beautiful, a testament to their love, a moment of genuine, unadulterated joy that felt like a lifeline in a sea of emotional turmoil. After the ceremony, at the reception, the contrast was jarring. The beautiful hall, the lavish decorations, the full band playing a lively tune, it was all a stark reminder of the financial sacrifice that had made it possible. My parents were there, their smiles a little too wide, a little too forced, as they greeted guests and played the part of the proud parents. Sarah and Mark, however, moved through the crowd with a quiet dignity. They were happy, but their happiness was tinged with a solemnity that only I understood. I found them during a break in the dancing, a quiet moment in a noisy corner. Sarah's face, now flushed with the excitement of the day, was still serene. Mark, holding her hand, looked at me with a new kind of respect in his eyes. He had been told the truth, and his face was a mix of shock and gratitude. "Michael," he said, his voice low and sincere, "thank you. For everything. For what you did. And for what you said. I would have wanted to know." "You're a good man, Mark," I said, a wave of warmth washing over me. "Take care of her." "Always," he said, and I believed him. The night was a whirlwind of toasts, dancing, and polite conversation. My parents approached me, a look of nervous anticipation on their faces. "Michael," my mother began, her voice barely audible over the music, We want to thank you for being here, for not making a scene." "I'm here for Sarah," I said, my voice firm. "Not for you, not to make your life easier. I'm here because she's my sister and I love her. I'm here because this is the place I'm supposed to be." Their faces fell, a look of disappointment and defeat settling over them. They had wanted a full reconciliation, a happy ending to their lie. But I wasn't ready to give them that, not yet. I had come to the wedding, but the road to forgiveness and to healing was still a long one. The night was a mix of joy and pain, a testament to the complex and messy reality of family. The long shadow of obligation was gone, but in its place was the long, slow, and uncertain path of rebuilding what had been broken. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope that someday we might just get there. The day after the wedding was a quiet and somber affair. The remnants of the celebration, discarded streamers, half-eaten cake, wilting floral arrangements, lay scattered around my parents' house, a physical manifestation of the emotional wreckage. Sarah and Mark had left for their honeymoon, a 2-week escape from the chaos, and a much-needed respite from the family turmoil. My parents and I were left to pick up the pieces. The silence in the house was heavy, punctuated only by the clinking of dishes as my mother cleaned up. My father sat at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee growing cold in his hands, his gaze lost in the distance. The energy from the previous night, the forced smiles and polite conversation, had dissipated, leaving behind a raw, unfiltered sadness. "I need to get some air," I said, my voice breaking the silence. I went for a walk, a long, aimless journey through the streets of my childhood. The houses were the same, the cars were the same, but the world I had left behind felt different. It was no longer a place of nostalgic innocence, but a place of painful truths. I found myself at the park again, the same bench I had sat on 2 nights before. The pond was a still mirror, reflecting the blue sky. I thought about the wedding, about the beautiful dress, the loving couple, the forced happiness of my parents. The memory felt both joyous and heartbreaking. It was a beautiful day, a testament to love, but it was also a stark reminder of the lies that had led up to it. I pulled out my phone and called David. "It's over," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "They know. Sarah knows everything." "How did it go?" he asked, his voice full of concern. "It was messy," I admitted. "A lot of tears, a lot of anger, but the truth is out. And Sarah, she was amazing. She was angry, but not at me, at them, for what they did." "I told you," David said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "She's not them, Mike. She's a good person. She was just caught in the middle, like you." The realization was a new kind of comfort. My sister, the one I had always shielded, was now an ally, a co-conspirator in our family's truth-telling. The bond between us, though tested by years of distance and deceit, was not broken. It was, in fact, stronger than ever. I went back to the house, a new sense of purpose in my step. I found my parents in the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the sofa, a chasm of unspoken emotions between them. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm. "Not about the money, not about the wedding, about us, about our family." My mother sighed. "Michael, please, let's just let it go." "I can't," I said, sitting in the armchair across from them. "And neither can you. This is the pattern. You use me, I get angry. You pretend it never happened, and we go back to the way things were. And then a few years from now, it happens all over again." I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not going to be your ATM. I'm not going to be the silent one who fixes everything and pretends he's not hurt. I'm done. My father looked at me, a flicker of something new in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It wasn't defensiveness. It was a quiet sorrow, a deep well of regret. "You have every right to be angry, son," he said, his voice low and heavy. "We were wrong. We were so wrong." The words, a direct and sincere apology, were like a balm on my wounded heart. The dam I had built around my emotions began to crack. I felt a wave of relief, a sense of a burden being lifted. "I know you love me," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I never doubted that. But love isn't just about providing. It's about respect. It's about honesty. It's about being a family." My mother, her face tear-streaked, looked at me. "I know, Michael, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry we let you down. We just wanted the best for Sarah. And we thought we could get away with it. Why didn't you just ask?" And I said, the question I had carried for so long finally escaping my lips. "Why couldn't you have just come to me and said, 'Michael, we need help'?" "We were ashamed," my father confessed. "We were ashamed we couldn't do it on our own. We were ashamed to ask our son for help, and we were ashamed to admit that we couldn't give our daughter the wedding of her dreams." The confession was a revelation. It wasn't about malice, it was about pride. A misguided sense of pride that had led them to a web of lies and deceit. We talked for hours, the conversation flowing between past and present. We talked about their struggles, their fears, their deep-seated desire to give their children a better life than they had. I talked about my life in New York, the pressures of my job, the sacrifices I had made to build a life I was proud of. We talked about Sarah, about her joyful ignorance, about her sudden, painful awakening. The conversation wasn't a quick fix. It wasn't a magical reconciliation. But it was a start. It was an acknowledgement of our shared pain, a promise to be more honest, more open, more real with each other. The old family, the one built on lies and unspoken resentment, was gone. But in its place a new one was beginning to form. A family built on truth, on vulnerability, and on a shared desire to heal. I stayed for a few more days, the atmosphere in the house slowly shifting from one of strained silence to one of quiet connection. We sat around the table, ate meals together, and talked about things that had nothing to do with money or weddings. We just talked about life. My father and I went for a walk, just the two of us, a simple, unspoken gesture of connection. My mother and I sat in the living room, and she, for the first time in years, asked me about my life, not as a provider, but as a person. The day I left, a sense of peace had settled over me. I wasn't leaving with a sense of triumph, but with a sense of hope. The long shadow of obligation had been replaced with the long, winding road of forgiveness, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't on that road alone. My family, though bruised and battered, was on it with me. We had a long way to go, but we were going to go there together. The wedding, the beautiful, heartbreaking day of my sister's marriage, was no longer just a symbol of betrayal. It was a symbol of a new beginning for a broken family, a beginning built on the ashes of our lies. And for that I was grateful. The return to New York was different this time. The city's noise, once a soothing white noise, now felt invigorating, a soundtrack to my new life. I had left Ohio a few days after the wedding, but the emotional echoes of the trip lingered. The conversations with my parents, the raw honesty with Sarah, and the quiet camaraderie with David had left an indelible mark. The family I had known was gone, but in its place a new, more authentic version was beginning to emerge. I went back to my life, but I was not the same man. The weight on my shoulders was gone, replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. The resentment that had simmered beneath the surface for so long had finally been released. The anger had been replaced by a quiet strength. My financial situation was changed, but the loss of money was now insignificant compared to the gain of my own self-worth. I called Sarah a few weeks into her honeymoon. She sounded happy, her voice filled with a genuine, unforced joy that I had not heard in years. "Michael," she said, her voice soft, "thank you again for everything. For the wedding, for telling me the truth, and for not holding it against me. "I'm so happy for you, Sarah," I said, and I meant it. "You deserve all the happiness in the world. I want to make it right," she said. "When we get back, Mark and I want to start a savings account for you. To help you get back on your feet, it's the least we can do." I was stunned. The gesture was unexpected, a testament to her newfound understanding and her desire to heal the rift between us. "So you don't have to do that, Sarah," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "The money, it's just money. What's important is that we're a family again." "No," she said, her voice firm. "We're going to do it. It's not about the money, Michael. It's about the principle, it's about doing the right thing, and it's about making sure you know how much we love you." The conversation was a turning point. It wasn't just my parents who had to change, it was all of us. The family dynamic had been so deeply ingrained, so entrenched in years of patterns, that it would take a conscious effort from all of us to change it. Sarah, in her simple, heartfelt gesture, was showing me that she was willing to do her part. The next few months were a quiet process of rebuilding. I talked to my parents more often, and our conversations were no longer just about their needs or my financial status. They were about their day, my day. The simple, mundane things that build a real relationship. They started to ask me for advice, not money. They started to share their hopes and fears, their successes and their failures. And I, in turn, started to open up to them. The distance between us, once a physical and emotional chasm, was slowly but surely beginning to close. I also made a conscious effort to build my own life, separate from my family. I started seeing a therapist, a kind and insightful woman who helped me unravel the years of emotional baggage I had been carrying. She helped me understand the toxic family dynamic I had been a part of, the role I had played, and the importance of setting boundaries. The $50,000 was just a symptom, she told me. The real problem was my inability to say no. The root of my pain wasn't the money. It was the emotional debt I had been living with my entire life. I started a new financial plan. I reevaluated my retirement goals, my savings, my investments. I had lost a significant chunk of money, but I had gained a new perspective. I was no longer saving for them. I was saving for me, for my future, for a life that was mine, and mine alone. One evening I was on a call with my mother. She was telling me about a new church she had joined, a small, welcoming community that she loved. "And Michael," she said, her voice full of pride, "we started a new savings account, your father and I. We're putting a little bit away every week, for our future, so we don't have to be a burden on anyone anymore." The words were simple, but they were a revelation. They were no longer a plea for help, but a statement of their own newfound independence. They were taking responsibility for their own lives, their own future. The long shadow of obligation was not just gone from my life. It was gone from theirs too. I went back to Ohio for Christmas. The trip was different. The house felt like a home, not a battleground. Sarah and Mark were there, and the holiday was filled with laughter and warmth. My parents, though older and a little quieter, seemed more at peace. The lies were gone, replaced by a quiet, honest love. We talked about everything and nothing. We reminisced about old times, and we talked about the future. On Christmas morning, I found a small card under the tree addressed to me. It was from Sarah and Mark. I opened it to find a check, a small check but a significant one, and a note. "A small start," it read. "The rest is coming. We love you, always." The words, simple and heartfelt, brought tears to my eyes. It wasn't about the money. It was about the gesture. It was about the act of a family, finally, truly, taking care of each other. The wedding, the painful event that had brought me to this point, was now a distant memory. The money, the betrayal, the anger, it was all a part of a past that was slowly fading. The future, a new, brighter future, was now in front of me. The family was not perfect. The scars of the past were still there, but we were healing, we were growing. We were learning to be a family, not out of obligation, but out of love. The story was no longer about a man who lost his money. It was about a man who found himself, and in finding himself, he found his family again. The years that followed the wedding were a slow, deliberate process of mending. The family was a fragile thing, A beautiful vase that had been shattered and painstakingly put back together. The cracks were still visible, but they were no longer fissures of pain. They were lines of history, a reminder of the storm we had weathered. My relationship with my parents continued to grow. They still called, but the tone of their calls had changed. They were no longer veiled requests for help, but genuine check-ins. They asked about my life, my work, my well-being, not as a means to an end, but as a genuine show of care. I had a new job, a promotion that came with a significant salary increase. I was doing well, better than I had been when I had given them the $50,000. The financial hit had been a blow, but it had also been a wake-up call. It had forced me to reevaluate my life, my priorities, and my relationship with money. I started saving more aggressively, not out of fear of their future needs, but out of a genuine desire to build a secure life for myself. Sarah and Mark's marriage was a beautiful thing to witness. They were happy, their love a quiet, steady force. She had insisted on continuing to pay me back, a small amount each month, a symbol of her commitment to healing the family's financial wounds. It wasn't about the money for me anymore. It was about the gesture, the act of taking responsibility, and the quiet promise that we were in this together. One summer I went back to Ohio for a family reunion. It had been years since we had all been together, and the air was filled with a nervous anticipation. My parents were in their late 70s now, and their faces were etched with the lines of age and experience. Sarah and Mark were there, along with their two young children, a boy and a girl, who ran around the backyard, their laughter a joyful sound. As I watched my niece and nephew play, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. I thought about my own childhood, about the moments of joy and the moments of struggle. I thought about the financial pressures that had always been a part of my parents' lives, and the quiet sacrifices they had made to give me and Sarah a good life. I realized that my anger, though justified, had also been born out of a sense of disappointment. I had expected them to be perfect, to be the pillars I had always envisioned, but they were just human, flawed, imperfect, and trying their best. Later that evening, as the sun began to set, my father and I sat on the porch swing, the one he had built himself years ago. He was quiet, a thoughtful man who often spoke more with his eyes than with his words. "You know, Michael," he said, his voice a low rumble, "I've thought a lot about what you said, about our pride, about our shame." I nodded, my gaze fixed on the horizon. The moment was ripe with unspoken emotions. "We were so afraid," he confessed, "afraid of being a burden, afraid of failing. We thought if we could just give Sarah this perfect wedding, we could pretend everything was okay. We could pretend we were the kind of parents who had it all figured out." "I know, Dad," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I know." "We took something from you that day," he said, his voice trembling, "more than just the money. We took your trust. We took your dignity. We took your place in the family. And for that, I am so, so sorry." The words, a direct and sincere apology from a man who had always struggled with emotional expression, were a final release. The last bit of pain, the last bit of anger, was gone. The chasm between us, once so wide and so deep, was finally bridged. I put a hand on his shoulder, a silent gesture of forgiveness. Later, my mother came out with a tray of iced tea. She sat on the porch rail, her gaze a little less guarded now. "I'm so proud of you, Michael," she said, her voice soft. "The man you've become, the life you've built, the way you handled all of this. You've taught us a lot about what it means to be a family." Her words were an acknowledgement of my growth, not just as a provider, but as a person. The validation I had always craved from them, the recognition of my own worth, was finally being given. The rest of the evening was a mix of laughter, stories, and a quiet, profound sense of connection. The family was no longer a forced gathering of obligation, but a genuine coming together of people who loved and respected each other. The old resentments, the old lies, were gone. We were just a family, a little bruised, a little battered, but whole. I left the next day with a sense of profound peace. The long shadow of obligation, the one that had loomed over me my entire life, was gone. It had been a long and painful journey, a journey that had cost me a significant amount of money and a significant amount of pain, but the cost was worth it. I had not just found my family again. I had found myself. I had found my voice. I had found my place. The story was no longer about a man who lost his money. It was about a man who found his dignity. And in that, I had found the truest kind of wealth. The wedding, the beautiful heartbreaking day of my sister's marriage, was no longer a symbol of betrayal. It was a symbol of our resilience, a testament to the power of truth, and a reminder that even in the darkest of moments, a glimmer of hope can shine through. The old wounds were healing, and a new, stronger family was emerging from the ashes. And for that, I was forever grateful. Years turned into a decade. My life in New York flourished. I had found love, a kind and wonderful woman named Eleanor, who was a perfect partner in every sense of the word. She knew about my family's story, the money, the wedding, the years of unspoken pain. She had been my rock, my sounding board, and my unwavering support through the long process of healing. She understood that the money was just a symbol, and the real issue was the deep-seated family dynamic that had defined my life for so long. My parents had truly changed. The small savings account had grown, a testament to their newfound financial responsibility. They were no longer a burden. They were just my parents, two people who had made a mistake and were trying their best to make it right. Our phone calls were easy, filled with laughter and love. They had visited New York, and I had gone back to Ohio several times a year. The physical distance between us was the same, but the emotional chasm had finally closed. Sarah and Mark's family had grown. They had 3 children now, a bustling, chaotic, and joyous household. Sarah and I were closer than we had ever been. We talked almost every day, sharing the mundane details of our lives, the little joys and the small frustrations. The money she had insisted on paying me back had eventually been put into an account for her children, a small but significant gesture that symbolized our shared commitment to a new, healthier family dynamic. One crisp autumn day, my mother called me. Her voice was weak but filled with a quiet resolve. "Michael," she said, her voice a little shaky. "I've been diagnosed with a heart condition. The doctors say I have a few good years left, but I need to get my affairs in order." A familiar knot tightened in my gut. The old fears, the old patterns came rushing back, the need for me to fix everything, to provide, to save them. But this time, it was different. This time, it was just information, not a request, not an obligation. I flew to Ohio the next day. The reunion was a somber one, but it was also filled with a new kind of love. My father, who had always been the quiet strength of the family, was now my mother's devoted caregiver. Sarah and Mark were there, their love a beacon of hope in a difficult time. We sat around the kitchen table, the same table where so many of our family's secrets had been hidden. This time, however, it was a place of honesty and truth. My mother, her face pale but her eyes clear, looked at me. "Michael," she said, her voice filled with a quiet strength. "Your father and we've talked about our will. We've decided to leave everything to you and Sarah. We want to make it right. We want to make sure you know that you are not just a provider. You are our son, and we love you more than words can say." The gesture was a final, profound act of apology. The money, the house, the small savings account, it was all a testament to their love, their regret, and their desire to heal the past. The legacy they were leaving behind was not one of financial burden, but one of forgiveness and reconciliation. My mother's health declined slowly but gracefully. We spent her last years together, a family united not by blood, but by a shared journey of pain and healing. I visited often, and the time we spent together was precious. We talked about everything and nothing. We reminisced about old memories, and we created new ones. The pain of the past was still there, a ghost in the background, but it no longer haunted us. The day she passed, the sky was a bruised purple, the same color it had been on the day she had called me with the wedding news. I stood at her funeral, a man of 45, and looked out at the faces of my family. My father, older and more fragile now, but with a quiet peace in his eyes. Sarah and Mark, their faces etched with grief, but their hands clasped together, a silent show of strength. My niece and nephew, young and innocent, a testament to the future. The wedding, the lie, the betrayal, it all felt like a lifetime ago. The years had softened the edges of the pain, and in its place a new, more profound sense of love had grown. I was no longer the angry son. I was no longer the silent provider. I was a man who had faced his demons, who had demanded respect, and who had found a way to forgive. My mother's legacy was not the heart condition that took her life. It was the forgiveness she had sought, the love she had given, and the family she had helped to rebuild. The $50,000, the source of so much pain and anger, had been a catalyst. It had been the turning point that had forced us all to face the truth, to confront our own flaws, and to find a way back to each other. The journey had been long and difficult, but the destination, a place of peace and reconciliation, was worth every step. The story was no longer about a man who lost his money. It was about a family that found its way home. The funeral was a quiet and somber affair, a reflection of my mother's final years. We buried her in the small cemetery behind the church she had loved, a place of peace and serenity. The air was crisp, the leaves on the trees a fiery red and orange, a beautiful and poignant backdrop to our grief. The family, a small but united group, stood together, a silent show of strength and solidarity. Afterward, we returned to my parents' house. It felt empty, the absence of my mother a physical weight in the air. We sat in the living room, the same space where the angry truth had been revealed years ago. The chairs were the same, the photos on the mantel were the same, but the people in the room were different. We were older, wiser, and more honest with each other. My father, his face a canvas of sorrow and fatigue, spoke first. "She was proud of you, Michael," he said, his voice a low rumble. "She was proud of the man you became. She always said you were the one who taught us what it means to be a family." The words, a final, unvarnished tribute, brought a wave of emotion that I had been holding back. The years of resentment, the bitterness, the pain, it all came rushing back, not as a destructive force, but as a testament to the journey we had all been on. Sarah, her eyes red, came and sat next to me. She took my hand in hers, a silent, loving gesture. "He's right, Michael," she said, her voice soft. "You saved us. Not with the money, with the truth, with your courage to stand up for yourself." The words were a final, profound acknowledgement of my role in our family's healing. I had not been a provider. I had been a catalyst. I had not been a victim. I had been a hero. And for the first time in my life, I truly believed it. Later that evening, my father and I were alone in his study. He handed me a small box, a wooden box, old and worn. "This was your mother's," he said, his voice trembling. "She wanted you to have it." I opened it to find a single tattered photo of my mother, young and vibrant, and a small, worn notebook. I opened the notebook to a page filled with my mother's familiar, elegant handwriting. It was a list of expenses for Sarah's wedding, the venue, the catering, the flowers, the dress. At the bottom of the page, in a different hand, was a line of text. It was my father's handwriting. "Paid for by our son, Michael, with his love." The words were a final, profound apology, a silent testament to the pain and the shame they had carried for so long. The money was just a number. The love, the sacrifice, the acknowledgement, that was the true currency of our family. I closed the box, a new sense of peace washing over me. The cycle was broken. The long shadow of obligation, the one that had loomed over me my entire life, was gone. It had been replaced by a new, more profound sense of love. The story was no longer about a man who lost his money. It was about a family that found its way home. I stayed for a few more days, a quiet, peaceful time with my father. We talked about his life, his regrets, his hopes for the future. We walked in the backyard, sat on the porch swing, and just existed in the quiet space between us, a space filled with a new kind of love and understanding. The day I left, my father hugged me, a long, firm embrace that felt like a lifetime of unsaid words. "I love you, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "and I'm so proud of you, of the man you've become." I drove away from the house, the Ohio landscape a blur of green and brown. The past was still there, a part of my story, but it no longer defined me. I was a man of 45, a man who had faced his demons and emerged stronger, a man who had found love, and a man who had, finally, truly, found his family. The story was over. The journey was complete. The wounds had healed, and the legacy was not one of pain and betrayal, but of forgiveness and love. The wedding, the beautiful, heartbreaking day of my sister's marriage, was no longer a symbol of our family's brokenness. It was a symbol of our resilience, a testament to the power of truth, and a beautiful, enduring reminder that even in the darkest of moments, a glimmer of hope can shine through. The long shadow of obligation was gone, replaced by the warm, gentle light of a new beginning.